Today on Bible Conversations, we're going to be talking about Heritage Christian University with the president of Heritage Christian University. All right, welcome back to another episode of Bible Conversations. We're really pumped about today's episode. It's kind of exciting. We have Dr. Kirk Brothers with us today, the president of HCU. And Dr. Brothers, you were with us a few months ago. Well, I think it might have been earlier this spring on the podcast, but yes. You weren't with us. We were
right.
meeting over Zoom to record a podcast. And so we're glad to actually have you here in person and welcome you into our studio.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I appreciated you letting me be involved before. And of course, I'm always glad to be around you guys again. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I appreciate you letting me do it today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course. So as we get going, really what we want to talk about is heritage, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what we're talking about, but we also kind of want to talk about your personal life to a certain degree,
yeah, I
right?
Understand. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Heritage Christian University. Why is Heritage such a good school?
Folks in our area know of a famous restoration preacher, T.B. Larimore, and his home, up until a couple of years ago when it was lost by fire, stood on the campus of Mars Hill Christian School, which is a K through 12 school. In the mid-1960s, there was a gathering of local preachers, elders, church leaders in his home. Of course, he'd been passed away many, many years. And in that gathering, one of the preachers said, I wish I knew who it was, somebody in the room, it may not even have been a preacher, but one of those church leaders said, we need a Bible college in Florence. And so it was that statement and that discussion that birthed our school. So it started in 1968. It took on the name International Bible College in 1970. Got a new president. That's when Charles Coyle came on as president. His daughter, Judge Carol Medley, is actually one of our board members now and lives in the area, worships at the Killen congregation, which is about 5 miles from where my house. I live in Killen, Alabama, even though the school's in Florence, Alabama. But he really gave the school its identity. He was a preacher. And so he came at the presidency from a preacher's perspective. And you'll find that in education, that in Christian education, that some will come to Christian education presidency more from the education side. Yeah. Some will come more from the preaching side. Some will be a little bit of a mixed bag.
Some will come from the financial side too.
Yes. Fundraisers.
Yeah.
Because all of those, especially at a Christian school, to some degree are a part of the job. Mm-hmm. Nobody can do all of them. Yeah. So you come with what you're stronger at and you work on what you're not. Yeah. And so you may come with the preacher side or the fundraiser side, etc. So yes, that's a very good point. And so he came at it from the preacher side. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I remember when I interviewed with the Heritage Board, I said, whatever you call me, at my heart, I'm a preacher and teacher. And so it was actually in the context of I want to teach a class a semester, that I'm excited about this job, but that's what I do. And so you bring that with you. But he really gave the school its trajectory. Okay. And so we haven't had – I'm the fourth president in the 53-year history of the school. Wow. So once they're there, they tend to stay a long time. Yeah. And I've been there. I'm in my fourth year at the school. So Heritage Christian, what drew me there is it is in a very unique position in the brotherhood. I had been teaching at, and I know I'm mixing two bags here together, but maybe in telling you why I came can tell you about what it does and what it offers. Yeah. You know, we were at Freed-Hardeman together. Yes. And I loved my time at Freed-Hardeman. I definitely didn't.
I think it was really just my freshman year, maybe sophomore as well, and then you took the job at HCU. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It wasn't because you came. Okay, there's no connection.
I took one class with Dr. Brothers, and he was like, "All right, I'm going."
I don't know. He told me at church last night. It definitely was.
Well, I always have told the 2018 class. I thought, well, nobody can top you, so I just will leave with you. And so
there you go.
But so I wasn't looking to go anywhere else. My plan was to stay at Freed and until, quote, retirement. You don't ever retire in preaching, but until I transition to whatever that final phase is in ministry. And they reached out to me. I I loved Freed, but what excited me about Heritage is their singular focus on training church leaders. Mm-hmm. So we fit. I knew a lot about Heritage. My parents had supported a student through school back in the IBC days. It changed from IBC to Heritage in 2000, and they really did that in connection with adding graduate programs. Okay. When they kind of moved to university status, they began to have discussions about what should we call ourselves, and so that's how we became Heritage. But back in the 80s, my dad was trained as an engineer. He was in the first engineering class of University of Alabama, Huntsville, trained by a bunch of NASA engineers, and he started out in the space industry with Lockheed. But he has preached at small churches around Kentucky most of my life. He also is really big in personal evangelism. So he converted a young man through the prison ministry. Wow. And when he got out, my mom and dad paid his way through what was International Bible College at the time. So I'd had that connection with the school. My parents always had thought a lot of the school. We grew up in Kentucky, but they knew about the school. Mm-hmm. And then when I was the preacher at Graymere, they actually had me come over and teach a course for a semester. And the only reason I didn't keep teaching for them while I was there is I got into a doctoral program, and something had to give. So I had some acquaintance. Rusty Pettis, who had been the youth minister for my girls when we were at Graymere, in fact, my girls still compare all youth ministers to him and Miss Dana. But Rusty worked, when he left Graymere as the youth minister, he worked about 5 years in admissions at Heritage. So I had a lot of tentacles, I guess, into the Heritage family. So I knew enough about them. As professors, those of us who were professors at Freed knew the professors at Heritage. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, Ed Gallagher and Justin Rogers have been good friends for years. They got their doctorates from the exact same school. I mean, have a lot. I mean, they have different personalities, but they also have a lot in common.
Smartest guys.
Two of the smartest people on the planet. Yeah. You got to have your coffee before you sit down and talk to either one.
Exactly.
But so I mean, we knew Nathan, we knew Jeremy, we knew Dr. Bajents and so forth. So we knew the professors at Heritage. So we at Freed always respected the professors at Heritage. We knew their credentials, etc. But what excited me when they reached out to me, one of the board members, the search committee guy, reached out to me. Basically, my name was turned in because there was a board member who used to be a deacon at a church I preached at in Mississippi. Brother Jim actually passed away this year. So he had turned in my name. They reached out to me. But what excited me about it is I knew the quality of education we could give because I knew most of the teachers. But one of the things that had become, first of all, I am a huge, huge believer in Christian education. Being able to study, if you go to a Christian school, you're going to take math and science and history, but being able to take science with a believer who has a Christian worldview radically impacts.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
How you look at science. One of the phrases I heard a long time ago that's been used by Gabeline and others was all truth is God's truth. Mm-hmm. And that is that anything that's true in the world came from God. Yeah. And so what happens when you have that Christian mindset that all truth is God's truth, then math becomes, it's not like you have sacred and secular. Mm-hmm. Math, you're studying something God built in. If it's true, if 2 + 2 is 4, then God did that. Yeah. And the same thing is science. So science is not discovering how the world made itself or some aliens did it, which is the new phase now. It's discovering what God did and what we can in our finite abilities, how he did it. Yeah. And so just being able, it changed everything. It changes, like, for example, I had a lot of nursing majors who took my daily Bible classes. And so learning nursing from the perspective that God made the body that you're going to try to keep alive or that you're trying to, it just changed everything. So I'm just, in the environment of Christians you're around, when you are in your 18 to 22, for some 24-year-old span where you're going to get through undergrad, you're forming networks that will impact you the rest of your life. Yeah. We all, know folks we don't see anymore, but think of the tentacles that come out of your degrees.
Yeah.
People you met led to this job, led to this relationship, led to this marriage or whatever. So I'm a big believer in Christian education. But I also saw that for guys going in, and we, of course, I shouldn't say got men and women, because we had especially a lot of ladies who studied youth ministry. They wanted to work with young people. They were marrying a youth minister. We had a lot who were going into missions. In fact, my executive assistant at Heritage, Melissa McFerrin, which was Vivens at Freed, she was a missions major. And so, but what I was finding is churches often won't talk to you if you don't have a degree in Bible.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just the case. In fact, anymore, a lot of your larger churches, if you don't have a master's in Bible, you're not even going to get on the list of folks to talk to them.
Yep.
But those have become so incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
You know, the last I looked, 36 or 37,000 is the average that a young person owes when they finish a 4-year degree from any school.
Yeah.
And
private education is just more. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about, having just finished at Freed. Thankfully, I've had a lot of folks in my life that have been helpful with that. Yeah. But no, I know what you're talking about. Education's not cheap. So that's really the big problem you see with, okay, we need to educate people, but it's not cheap. So how do we reconcile those two things?
Well, what I liked about Heritage is, okay, we just do Bible. That's my passion. Yeah. People invested in me my whole life. And so I ended up preaching and doing ministry and teaching, what I call teaching ministries in the Lord's church, because I believe we all minister. Yeah. But not all ministries are teaching ministries. And so the way I got into teaching and preaching ministries is people who influenced me, starting with my own parents. And so as I think about that and think about those who want to go into ministry and those who want to prepare and train for ministry, it has just become such a financial burden. I was especially noticing it with youth ministry. I think about one youth minister who lived in Florence, who was one of my former students. He told me one day, he said, I owe $65,000 in school loans for my degree.
Goodness.
Wow.
And so this is anecdotal. I haven't done research on it, but I kept running into youth ministers at 2, 3, 4 years down the road. They were leaving youth ministry to go do something else
because they can't afford it.
Well, when
they can't afford to pay the loans on what they make.
Yeah, they had to decide between school loans, a baby, and youth ministry.
Yeah.
When they get to the point if they're married and want to have kids, they start thinking about that, and the numbers don't add up anymore. Especially the big thing that hits them is they have no insurance.
Yeah.
Our churches don't. One of the great disservices our churches are doing those in ministry is not providing them health care.
Yeah.
And so if you're in ministry, if you owe $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, I remember talking to two of my former students one day, both of them owed north of $40,000. So when I'm giving you these numbers, these aren't just random numbers. These are coming stuff from students. Yeah. So what I liked about Heritage, first of all, I don't have to run all those other departments.
Yeah.
We do math and science, and you take history, and you take English Comp 1 and 2 with Miss Jeannie. All of those things we do just like you would at any other 4-year liberal arts school.
Yeah.
But I've got University of North Alabama right there, and we actually have an articulation with them. We have a great relationship with them. There are a bunch of members of the church who teach there. Okay. There are a number of retired teachers who are there. We have Florence City Schools. We have Mars Hill, a Christian school system. So I've got PhDs all around me.
Yeah.
Some of them are retired. Some of them are still teaching, and they can do a class on the side. Or if they're retired, there's like one class a semester. That would be kind of fun.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go to faculty meetings, but you get a little money on the side, and you get to stay in the classroom. So I can get math teachers, I can get science teachers, and I don't have to run a whole science department to do it.
Yeah.
And if your school has a science or medical department, they're just expensive to run.
Yeah.
So what immediately helps us is I don't have to run all those departments. I just run one department. We're a Bible department. We have undergrad and grad. We're accredited, so we're different from a preaching school in that you get accredited degrees.
Yeah.
You can do associates, bachelors.
You get all
3
of the
levels
basics
of masters
with it, right?
Yes. I mean, you're going to take again, math, science,
Yeah.
all the gen ed stuff that you would take anywhere.
Other than that's what's different than a regular preaching school.
Your preaching schools have gotten to where they've started doing like some English and many of them are beginning to do some Greek and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to get, like for us, you're going to have an accredited degree that you should be able to take to pretty much any religious school in the country that you want to.
Yeah.
But yet we're not quite like some of our other brotherhood schools in that every major is a Bible major.
Yeah.
And so I say if you want to look at us, kind of compare us to the Bible departments of the other schools instead of the full student population.
Yeah.
So what excited me as far as becoming part of the Heritage family is I thought, I know we can give them a really good education. Mm-hmm. Also, one thing that's a huge asset, okay, Florence and the Shoals area, it is the belt buckle of the Bible Belt.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I can remember sitting down with Phil Sanders one day, and he said, you realize that, I don't know if it's still true, but he talked about there was a time when per capita there were more members of the church in the Shoals in Florence than anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, I still think that's true. It was just a few years ago when I heard that.
I think definitely it's probably still true in the U.S.
Yeah.
There might be some pockets somewhere in other parts of the world since
possibly.
It's exploded in Africa and Asia.
Yeah.
And,
well, so for our listeners, what Kirk is talking about as far as the belt buckle of the Bible Belt,
yes.
The Bible Belt is basically Tennessee down to Texas and pretty much through the South because there's a lot of churches, there's a lot of Christians.
Yes.
So it's called the Bible Belt. And what you're talking about with Florence, that is the just so much condensed.
They told me when I got there are 500 churches within 75 miles of our campus. Mm-hmm. So all of our students basically work with the church.
Yeah.
Some already are when they come. I mean, we have a lot of students who've been doing ministry. They just never were trained. They were doing a job as a foreman, and this little church needed somebody.
Yeah.
But then you've got others who come to us who have never worked with the church. But if they want to work with a congregation, they can do it. So that's a huge. If you can give them outstanding training, on-the-job opportunities right down the street in pretty much any area of ministry you want to go to, and it's not as expensive. So already our tuition is going to be a third of anybody else's.
Yeah.
Mainly because I don't have to run all those other departments, but then because of what we do with scholarships. So just to give you a number, our graduating class last year, 87.5% of those who graduated in May of 2021, this past May, did not borrow any money on their degree.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. And that's how you keep guys in ministry. That's how you keep them from 4 years down the road saying, I got to find something else. I got to provide for my family. That's remarkable. That's incredible.
So that's what attracted me. Incredible education, ministry opportunities, and very affordable. And so hey, I like, because my passion is training leaders. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's what we do.
Yeah. And so you saw that and you wanted to be a part of it.
Yes.
Of course.
And the way we do it is really, like when you talk about recruiting areas, ours is literally the world, because one of the things that happened with the pandemic is, I say everybody came where we already were. Mm-hmm. One of the things that helped us academically during the pandemic is that we already, I think all but one class was already available by Zoom. Mm. And that one class is a rarely offered kind of, you do a field trip and that kind of stuff. Kind of requires being on campus.
Yeah.
And so everything we had was already on Zoom. So what happened is when the Brotherhood schools made the decision, and one of the things that was helpful is during the heart of the pandemic in those early days, the Brotherhood presidents, we had a conference call every other Friday.
Oh, wow.
And we would just talk among ourselves what's going on. Of course, I mean, you've got folks from sea to shining sea, so very different things going on. But that was hugely beneficial.
Yeah.
As you're wrestling, what policies are you going to use? What are the legal ramifications? What are the health ramifications? It was just huge.
Wow.
But one of the things that helped us is all of us within 2 to 3 days did the same thing. Mm-hmm. And what a lot of the other presidents had to deal with was they had to figure out, how do we keep teaching a class that was only taught in the classroom when students are all home. Well, for us, every class was already set up as you could come and sit in the classroom. Mm-hmm. You could do it by Zoom, or you could do it asynchronous where we record it and you can watch it later. You turn in all your assignments online if you want to.
Yeah.
So we just kept right on teaching.
Yeah.
Some had to adjust to studying from home.
Yeah, the students made a little adjustment, but as far as the teachers and the professors, they just kept on going.
And so, we've actually seen a huge increase in distance learning students. One of the things we did the first summer, we began to have people in April and May of 2020 started calling us. We've always had a decent audit population.
Yeah.
Probably more than our other brotherhood schools. A number of elders, deacons, Bible teachers will audit classes.
Yeah.
Or even older preachers like Corey. I know he likes to audit classes with y'all every so often.
My first class I taught, my areas are preaching, preparing, homiletics, leadership, and then I teach one fundamentals of youth ministry class.
Yeah.
And my first class was a leadership class, and that particular one they dual listed it for. We don't do it dual list anymore, but we did then. So you had undergrad students and grad students. You just adjusted their assignments and so forth. In that class, I had a 17-year-old senior who was dual enrolling.
Okay.
And then I had a 75-year-old elder from Louisville who was auditing the class. And that was amazing because,
awesome.
He had been a preacher for 40 years and was now an elder. So when the 17-year-old asked questions, I just turned to the 75-year-old elder teacher and
that's the easiest class to teach then.
It's just phenomenal. And there was another class that he was in, and we were talking about the parables.
Yeah.
And so I said, brother, tell me, how did you do parables when you were preaching?
Yeah.
Or not parables. We were talking Proverbs. That's what it was.
Okay.
I said, how did you preach on Proverbs? So he just started walking through a series he did on Proverbs. So, we are a very eclectic group, and we're from all over. Like in this youth ministry class, I've got a guy that joins us live every week from Glasgow, Scotland.
Wow.
And so the world can access us, and so we have seen, when we began to see people saying, hey, can we audit some classes more than we were seeing.
Yeah.
So the administrative council and I, we got together and I said, hey, this is an opportunity. And actually several of the brotherhood schools began to say, okay, well, what do we do? What can we do? So we're thinking from multifaceted. First of all, how can we better serve the church? What was happening is people were getting 2 hours a day back.
Yeah.
Because in our area, you got folks who work out of Nashville. They're used to driving, and I'm sure it's like this in the Dallas.
Oh yeah, you spend an hour in traffic going there, an hour coming back.
So if you're working from home, you just got 2 hours a day back. And what we found is a lot of folks wanted to use that in study.
Yeah.
And so they started reaching out to us. So what we decided that summer, awesome. we usually have very few students in the summer. I mean, very few.
Yep.
We do 3 classes, and they're all distance learning. We added 3 classes and did them free that summer of 2020. And what that meant was you not only could audit it for free, you could do it for credit for free.
Wow.
Nice.
And we tried to use ones. Our goal was, first of all, for those folks who were calling us saying, hey, I want to study the Bible, can you provide it? And so it gave them a place to study.
You're like, yes, for free, you can join this
class.
class.
You're in. Number 2, it gave our students a price break.
Yeah.
Because their families didn't know what was going to happen, and I guess we still know what was going to happen, but they were very nervous at that time. Yep. So they could knock out the Gospels or Life of Christ, which is required of all of our undergraduate students. They could knock it out for free.
Yeah. So
that's a pretty big saving. But it also allowed people to be introduced and reintroduced to us. And so we had 155 audit students that summer.
Wow. That's
not
awesome.
Counting our credit students.
Yeah.
And so since that time, our distance learning numbers have gone through the roof because during the pandemic, I know we all have Zoom fatigue, but we've also realized we can do it.
Yeah.
And, of course, you've got Google Teams. There are several formats you can use, but we realized that you can do 2-way communication digitally.
Yeah.
In the meantime, first of all, the government gave all the schools a little money to improve their distance learning.
Yeah.
And so what we began to think about, we thought about some projects that were probably 3 to 4 years down the road. We said, okay, we've got this seed money. We can only use it for this. If we don't use it, it goes away. So let's move that project up and let's go raise some money. It wasn't enough to do everything, but it was a decent start.
Yeah.
And so we just started reaching out to people.
Yeah.
And so all our classrooms are now Zoom classrooms. Our 2 major meeting rooms, conference rooms are Zoom classrooms. So we got touch screens. Everybody can see everybody. Everybody can hear everybody. And you've experienced that in the classroom. So you might want to elaborate.
I have. Yeah, they've got whiteboards that you can just write on the whiteboard with your finger, and It's a digital whiteboard. The Zoom camera goes both ways, so you can see the classroom, you can see the professor. The sound is really good. It's very easy to interact. It's awesome. Yeah, it's really good. The first 2 years that I was there, it was basically there was one camera angle, and if you spoke, it was through the loudspeakers.
Yes,
and it was if you were on Zoom and somebody else on Zoom was speaking, it was kind of hard to hear.
Yeah,
and it's not like that anymore.
Yeah,
it is considerably better now.
Well, we felt like that was priority number one.
Yeah.
If everybody's going to be online, one of our goal is to have the online experience as close as you can get to being in the classroom.
Yep.
And so we feel like we really closed that gap a lot.
Yes.
Like now with our new touch screens, I can annotate anything on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a PowerPoint, if it's a web page, I can circle, I can draw notes, and
that's cool.
And so it's really, I hope, from the student perspective, that it's enhanced that experience.
Yes, it has.
So
I will speak for me.
You can from you, it's been helpful.
Yes.
So I really do think we have a lot to offer.
Yeah.
We're going to be different from other brotherhood schools. We have campus students. We don't have as many campus students as the other brotherhood schools would have. We don't have social clubs, and we don't have a basketball team.
Yeah.
Our students kind of adopt University of North Alabama, so there's usually a contingent at the UNA football games, and actually do a decent amount of stuff with the UNA Student Center. There's always been a strong connection between those two.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's the case now. I knew a couple years ago, in fact, the president of the Student Association and our SGA president went to church together, and so they would plot things at worship services.
Pretty cool, actually.
But if you want to do ministry, and if you want to be trained to do teaching ministries in the church, and you want to be able to do it without having a mountain of debt, I really think we've got a lot to offer.
Yeah.
We're in phase 2 of application for ATS accreditation for our graduate programs. And so we'll keep moving through that until I remember I was at Freed when Freed went through the ATS process, and basically I can remember as professors we talked about, hey, if this could help us and our students, let's do it. But if at any point, I can remember as Mark and Justin and others were leading us through that process, I guess especially Mark, if it was going to cause us to sacrifice our mission, the mission's more important than accreditation. Yep. So that's the same approach we've had at Heritage. So we've done phase 1, phase 2 will begin in January. If we can do that, we think it'll help our students transferring degrees.
Good.
And will that ATS backlog to those who have already graduated?
I don't know that we know enough yet to answer that. So
Chris is asking for himself.
Yeah,
it's not done by the time he graduates.
Well, 100%. Whatever they're evaluating is going to be the same stuff. Does that make sense? But I think what you're going to find, first of all, just recognize this is me off the cuff. So this is not, I don't
all
speak
good.
yet. But
this was not prepared to be talked about, Chris.
It wasn't. That's okay. We don't have to.
When you transfer,
they're
going, and you say your degree's from this school, they're going to look to see what accreditation that school had.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they're going to go back and look, okay, well, 3 months after you graduated is when they actually got it to ETS.
Yeah, actually look at the dates and everything.
I'm not saying they won't, but...
that's fair.
And if it's anywhere close, they're going to know it's the same basic stuff.
Yeah.
We know we'll need to adjust things to meet the way they do things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I also know we're not far apart. Like, here's what I mean. And much of it is semantics. It's how you word things, how you organize things, how you compartmentalize things, more so than what you're doing is not good educational practice.
Like what you're teaching,
So real quick, I do for our listeners want to explain what ATS is.
Yes.
It's the Association of Theological Schools in the United States of America. So basically it's just a grouping of schools that teach about God that are saying this school is good at what they do.
And they only do graduate programs.
Yeah.
And most of our brotherhood schools have it for their graduate program. Not all of them do, but most do now for their graduate programs. So we already have accreditation for undergrad and grad, but this would be an additional for our grad. And I actually serve in the spring, I will do my 3rd tour being on a visiting team because all the schools that are in an association that are being accredited, you go and visit each other's schools. So you'll have 5-member teams. And so like I'm usually the administration and board representative. So that's my focus is, your VPs, your president, how do they do things? And then I look at the board, the relationship between the board and your VPs, etc. And so I'll be on my 3rd visiting team this coming spring. But I can tell you the last school that I was a part of a visiting team for, they did ATS and our accreditation, which is through the Association of Biblical Higher Education. They did those within weeks of each other and used the same basic forms. They just, the different areas of criteria that you're looking at had different numbers. So it might be number 7 on this list, and it might be number 3 on this list. But so what that tells me is much of what ATS is going to ask of us is what we're already doing.
Yeah.
Because I've seen them side by side.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We're not going to sacrifice our mission for accreditation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that does bring me
approach
to the
we'll
question:
take.
what is the mission of Heritage?
Well, our official mission statement says that we exist to advance the churches of Christ through the training of servant leaders, through undergraduate and graduate degrees and continuing education. It goes on to talk about we create effective communicators and preachers and teachers and missionaries for real-world ministry with an emphasis on evangelism and focus on Scripture. So that's the
official.
The Kirk version of the mission statement. But really, we're about training people for ministry, helping the church to grow by training those who are going to be the leaders and teaching ministers. And again, I keep going back to that teaching ministry thing.
Yeah.
So like I think about churches I've been at who've had the Graymere Church, for example. I mentioned that because that was the last one I was at, had a great benevolence program. But you can be heavily involved in a benevolence work, which is a major ministry, and it is as much being like Jesus as any ministry you can do. But you may never in that process ever teach somebody about Jesus or how to go to heaven. So when I say teaching ministry, I'm involved in, you're going into some area of work in the Lord's church that involves leading other Christians or teaching them in some capacity. So that's what we focus on.
Yeah.
And
So there's been a couple verses that have kind of popped to mind as we have had this discussion. The first one is from 2 Timothy chapter 4. And this is Paul speaking to Timothy. I charge you in the presence of God and of Christ Jesus, who is to judge the living and the dead, and by his appearing in his kingdom, preach the word. Be ready in season and out of season. Reprove, rebuke, and exhort with complete patience and teaching. For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but have itching ears. They will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander off into myths. And we see that happening a lot today. And so what Heritage is doing with regards to teaching the gospel and teaching how to be a gospel teacher, and everything in between, right, I think is so impressive and incredible. And it also reminds me, as you've been talking about, you've got somebody in Glasgow, Sweden, right, who's in your class. We've got
let's go Scotland,
Sweden.
I could have said Sweden, but it should be Scotland.
I think you
Graham
said Scotland.
and my friend
I
Adam
said
will be
Sweden.
really upset with me.
I think I actually am going to see Graham today, so I might have to mention it to him that I
We
messed it
moved
up.
his city to another
We moved it,
country.
yeah. But so we've got people from all around the world that are at Heritage, and that reminds me very much of the Great Commission, right? Verse 18 of Matthew 28, Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. Behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. And so as you went over your mission statement, not yours, right, but the universities, and you've been talking about Heritage and everything that it entails, the job is to teach and to reprove and to rebuke and to exhort and to go and to make disciples and to teach and to baptize. And I think that's awesome. I don't, I've been going to Heritage now I'm almost done. This is my 2.5 years. I don't know if that's how you say it, but once I get my degree, I'm sure I'll be able to speak properly.
Now you're not sleeping enough.
Yeah.
That's what coherent sentences together.
But I'm getting there, right? And one of the things I've noticed is the camaraderie that is shared between the students and the connections that are made, as you mentioned earlier. But most of all, the spiritual emphasis that is placed in all of the classes. I'm learning Greek this semester, and it is just brutal. But there have been multiple times where we've just sat down and we've talked about the Spirit, right? The pneuma of God, or we've talked about just various aspects of ministry and of life as a Christian because of a Greek word that came up that we've been translating in the Scriptures, and it's just exciting and it's really cool.
So have you got Ed? Dr.
I
Gallagher?
do.
Okay.
I do have Dr. Gallagher. Yeah. So he has definitely given me anxiety this year, and I'm sure he will be glad to know that because he has been preaching to us. You need to be anxious about this.
Yeah. He's like, if you're not all in, don't do Greek.
Yes.
Don't pretend. Or, no fake.
So it's,
well, I'll tell you, I don't know if you've ever gotten to hear him preach much.
Not much.
He is not your typical preaching style, but he is phenomenal as a communicator. And you think about as smart as he is, and you've seen him in the classroom in Greek, he has this amazing ability to make the text real.
Yeah.
He is my youngest daughter's favorite preacher, and that includes her dad.
Okay.
So, so if that tells you something. Now, my oldest daughter, I may still be number one.
Yeah, I've had him for a couple of classes, and actually the first class I took at Heritage was about the Old Testament, his introduction to the Old Testament. It was with Dr. Gallagher.
Yeah.
And when he started talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls, I was just absolutely fascinated.
Yeah.
We're talking about 2,000-year-old pieces of paper.
Yeah.
And I'm just eyes wide open, ears,
Yes.
Just tell me more about these old pieces of paper, right? Like I'm excited about it. And I actually got to use some of that information to help the teens here. And so I think it's really exciting that what is happening at Heritage. I haven't been to any of the undergraduate classes there. I may end up auditing some later because it seems to me that, while I do have a foundation in Christ, you can always build on that.
Yes.
And just because I'm a graduate doesn't mean that I'm better than being in an undergraduate class.
Well, I audited when Ed did when we did those summer classes. He did a class on the history of the Bible. Ed is one of, not just in the churches of Christ, but in the Christian religious world at large, he is one of the authorities on the text of Scripture.
He's written a couple of books now, and so one of the books that I had to read as a textbook, he was cited in as I looked at it, I was like,
yes. So when he did History of the Bible, I took it as an audit student.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I have in my office, I have an old slate, like, it's what would that be? Handheld 1.0, but just a school slate, and you'd write on with a
talking like a chalkboard.
A little chalkboard school slate. That was my neighbor's. She passed away. The family gave it to me. It's probably 110 or 20 years old. Wow. But it hangs in my office, and it has a sign on it that says "Never stop learning."
Yeah.
So as you think about that, that's why we have an army of people who do that. But that's one of the reasons I'm here in Texas right now.
Yep.
Is first thing I started when I became president is whatever I'm in, I wanted to train for that.
Yeah.
So I started going to all these training workshops for the presidency, but I'm also still teaching every semester. And so we've been talking in our faculty meetings because it's neat. I take off the president hat. I can remember the first meeting. One of our professors said, "Now, are you here as president or as a teacher?" I said, "I'm a teacher now." And so it's neat being a part of those faculty meetings as a part of the faculty.
Yeah.
But we've been talking a lot about professional development and go to workshop seminars. And so we're talking about this, and I think, last 3 years, I've been going to all these workshops on fundraising and presidency and even enrollment and those kind of things because all of that rolls into my goal. And I thought, I haven't been to a professor's workshop since I made the transition. Yeah, I'm still teaching. So that's what I'm here. I'm here for 2 professor back-to-back workshops and things related to what I do because you never stop learning.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this entire conversation, it was reminding me about Ephesians 4. And I don't know if you saw the signs and the banners that we've had around the building since you've been here last night and this morning. But our theme for Keller Church of Christ this year has been one. Did you have it pulled up also?
No, I was going to say I use 11 through 14 in all my classes. So
okay.
You're going to...
I'm about to go to 4 through 6.
You're singing what I love to talk about. Preaching to the choir.
But our theme has been one this year. One
Yes.
Lord, one faith, one baptism. Really, each of those ones that's mentioned in verses 4 through 6 of Ephesians 4. And that's what I see with really what we're talking about here. As far as the brotherhood schools working together and the presidents meeting together on Zoom. Whether it's the entire church, these brothers and sisters from across the world gathering together to meet over Zoom. It's all just one. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and read it for us. Ephesians 4, please. 4 through 6. There's one body and one spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. And man, I see that with Heritage. I see that with really what you've talked about through your work with the different congregations and all of these supporting congregations of Heritage and all of the donors from all over. It's the church. And, people always say when you meet somebody who you have a, common friend with, it's like it's a small world. Well, maybe a small world, but it's a great church.
Amen. What struck me when you said Ephesians 4, in all of my classes, leadership, preaching, youth ministry, doesn't matter. We're going to spend time in Ephesians 4, usually 11 through 16, but especially 11 through 14. And where that connects to what you're talking about is he talks about, at the beginning of the chapter, be one.
Yes.
Be one heart, one mind. And then he transitions to saying that oneness just fits the essence of what it is to be in God, because you've got one Lord, one faith, one baptism.
Yep.
And then he talks about Jesus as he is in his victory parade, leading a host of captives captive, the echoes of those great victory parades that would march through the streets of Rome, where they would leave the captive army in the back. And in those victory parades, the victorious general or those who were serving him would toss gifts to the crowd. Often it was loaves of bread that they would toss to the crowd. And so he plays on that and says, okay, in light of this desire for oneness, Jesus in his great victory parade gave gifts to the church. Well, what were the gifts? And some he gave as apostles, and some as prophets, and some as evangelists, and some as pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints, for the work of service, to the building up of the body of Christ, until we attain to the unity of faith and knowledge of the Son of God, to a mature man, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of Christ. He gave leaders to the church to assist in unity. That we can't be unified in heart and in fellowship if we're not unified, as he puts it, in what you know and believe. He says unity of faith and knowledge and mature into the likeness of Christ. So to think that's what leadership is. And so what's ironic is Paul says Jesus gave leadership positions to the church to unify her. But unfortunately, think of how many of the divisions in the church
have come from that.
Have come from what were supposed to be gifts, and they became curses. Which makes what Christian schools do even more important.
Amen.
We've got to train leaders in the church
to be leaders that
are going to lead the way God intended, to unify us in faith and knowledge and help us to become like Jesus.
Amen to that. Well, Kirk, this has been a really great discussion. I always love getting to talk to you whenever you come in. And next time you're here for another workshop, let us know.
I'll do it. I'm in Texas. Texas has really been amazing to our school. We track.
It's just because Texas is amazing.
Well, Texas is amazing. My wife lived in Lubbock for 3 years when her dad was at
Sunset.
At Sunset. And then, so she's always kind of had a special place in her heart. For a long time.
For the Lone Star stuff.
So I've had Lone Star stuff around my house. We don't have one right now, but I remember we had a I don't know, chandelier or something that was made out of Texas license plates for a while at one of our church homes we lived in.
That's good.
And usually when we look at the top 5 states that we have students from and that we have donors from, Texas is always there. Usually it's third.
Yeah.
I mean, think about for a school in Alabama.
Yeah, Alabama's going to be one.
It's going to be Alabama, Tennessee, and Texas. That's
Yeah.
usually how it is most years, both in students and often in donors.
Yeah.
So the Lord's church has been amazing to us in Texas. So I come here. I've got a lot of friends here, and we'll be at 3 different churches on this trip. And just
Very good.
appreciate what you guys are doing. I'm glad to be here. I've gotten to spend time with folks from Keller at the big fundraiser that we have in Louisville. But this is the first time I've actually gotten to be on your property. So thank you.
Yeah, well, we appreciate having you. And Dylan, I'll let you close us out here.
Alrighty. Well, for all of our listeners, if you want to know how you can contact us, if you have any questions or comments about today's episode, or if you want to know how you can help us out, we have a shop online. And so all the information for how to contact us, how to support us, will be played here momentarily.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Bible Conversations. We want to encourage you to check out our proud partners, Ministry League. They have a website as well as an app that you can download from your smartphone.
Yeah, not only that, but also be sure to send us an email. You can reach us at kcocbibleconversations@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, what your thoughts and comments are on today's episode.
And if you have any questions or any comments, anything that you would like to let us know, please send us a text at the following number, 972-905-0856.
Yeah, and that way we'll be able to get that comment and get back with y'all as well. And please leave reviews and comments. I know there's a lot of places that you listen to this podcast that you can leave comments and reviews. I know Apple Podcasts, I'm pretty sure iHeartRadio and others, you can leave reviews and comments as well.
And last, but most certainly not least, we ask that you share this with your friends. We do our best to provide biblical and strong discussion, and we hope that you can feel free to share that with everybody that you love and come in contact with. Thank you all so much for all of your support. We love you.